The years had quietly passed. The three little girls, who had once clung to each other in fear on the streets of Baku, were now growing into confident young ladies. Their home was no longer filled only with the sounds of toys. It had become a place overflowing with dreams, ambitions, and plans for the future. Mary was now 12 years old. Her long hair, thoughtful eyes, and confident voice made a lasting impression on everyone she met. Her teachers often described her as a girl with an extraordinary sense of justice. She could never stay silent when something was unfair. Whenever one of her classmates was upset, she was always the first to offer comfort. Mayhin had turned 11. She was quiet, thoughtful, and carried a deep inner world. Numbers had become her greatest strength. The little girl, who had once been afraid of mathematics, was now winning academic competitions. She loved helping people, but she did so quietly, just like Martin. Marin was now 10 years old and remained the joyful heart of the family. Her laughter echoed through the villa every day. Her performances in the school's drama club amazed her teachers. She could spend hours acting in front of the mirror, performing dramatic scenes, before suddenly bursting into laughter at herself. An evening around the dinner table. Rain tapped softly against the windows that evening. Aitan had prepared dinner while Martin lit the fireplace. The three sisters filled the dining room with laughter as they shared funny stories from school. After a while, Martin took a sip of his tea and smiled. So then, he looked at each of them proudly. What do my wonderful girls dream of becoming when they grow up? As always, Mary answered first. Her eyes were filled with determination. I want to become a lawyer, just like Mom. Aitan looked at her daughter with surprise and pride. Really? Yes, Mary replied. Because I believe in justice. I don't want people to suffer because of unfairness. Aitan's eyes became misty. She leaned over and kissed her daughter's forehead. You've had a fair and compassionate heart ever since you were little. Then everyone turned toward Mayhin. She smiled shyly. I want to become a businesswoman, just like Dad. Martin raised an eyebrow playfully. Oh? So you'll be taking over the company someday? Mayhin nodded with a gentle smile. But not just to earn money. She paused. I want to help people. I want to build homes for children who have nowhere to live. Silence settled over the table. Everyone understood exactly why she had said those words. Aitan blinked back tears while Martin looked at his daughter with immense pride. My kind-hearted girl. Finally, everyone's attention turned to Marin. She sat up excitedly. I want to be an actress. The whole family laughed. Who could have guessed? Mary teased. Marin spread her arms dramatically. I love being on stage. I want to make people laugh. Maybe I'll be in movies, maybe in the theater. Aitan gently brushed a hand through her daughter's hair. It feels as though you were born beneath stage lights, my sweetheart. Mary falls silent. As the evening went on, the conversation gradually became quieter. But Aitan noticed something. Mary had suddenly grown silent. The cheerful girl, who had been laughing only moments before, now stared thoughtfully at the table. Aitan spoke gently. What's wrong, my beautiful girl? Mary hesitated. Then she spoke softly. Mom. Her voice was fragile. What kind of family did we really come from? The atmosphere around the table changed instantly. Mayhin and Marin quietly looked toward their older sister. Mary took a slow breath. Sometimes I wonder. She lowered her eyes. Who were my real mother and father? Another pause. Why did they leave us? Aitan felt her heart tighten. Martin quietly closed his eyes for a brief moment. They had always known this day would come. Because as children grow, it isn't only their height that changes. Sometimes the unanswered questions inside them grow as well. The quiet truth. Martin gently moved his chair closer. His voice remained calm. Yes. Life gave you a very difficult beginning. The three sisters listened carefully. Perhaps the people who brought you into this world couldn't protect you. Perhaps they made painful mistakes. He paused before continuing. But I want you to remember one thing. Emotion filled his voice. We chose you with our hearts. Aitan wiped away a tear before speaking. Anyone can give birth to a child. But becoming a mother or a father is about much more than that. She gently placed her hand on Mary's cheek. A real family is built with love. Mayhin's eyes filled with tears. Quietly, Marin reached out and held both of her sister's hands. Aitan continued softly. If one day you decide you want to learn more about your biological family, we will never stand in your way. Mary looked up in surprise. Really? Martin nodded. Yes. Because love grows through trust, not through fear. Aitan smiled gently. But never forget this. All three girls looked at her. We will never leave you. Hearts held together. At that moment, Mary stood up and embraced Aitan. Mayhin and Marin immediately joined them. Then Martin opened his arms and wrapped all four of his girls in one warm embrace. In that moment, they all understood the same truth. The past could leave scars, but love could heal them. End of chapter. Sometimes, your true family isn't the one that brought you into the world. It's the one that never lets go of your hand in the darkest moments. And that night, the three sisters understood once again that what bound them together was never blood. It was love. It was the final days of spring. Warm sunlight poured through the large windows of the villa, while the sweet scent of jasmine from the garden drifted inside. That day, Aitan decided to tackle a task she had been postponing for years, sorting through the old cabinets and archive boxes. Large cardboard boxes covered the living room floor. Old photographs, file folders, documents from many years ago. One by one, forgotten memories came back into the light. Mary was helping her mother. She laughed as she dusted another folder. Mom, you really never throw anything away. Aitan smiled while looking at an old photograph. Some memories are too precious to throw away. As Mary arranged the files on the shelves, one dark blue folder tucked away in the corner caught her attention. Official government stamps covered its front. She gently blew the dust away and turned it over. Then she froze. Printed across the cover were the words: Child Protection and Guardianship Records. Mary frowned. Mom, what's this? Aitan's hand stopped in midair. The smile disappeared from her face. Her heart tightened. Because that folder had silently guarded the past she had tried to protect for so many years. Just then, Martin walked into the living room. The moment he saw Aitan's expression, he immediately understood. Without saying a word, he walked over. But Mary had already opened the folder. Inside were old reports, official documents, and several photographs taken years before. One photograph showed three little girls. Their clothes were dirty. Fear filled their eyes. Mary stopped breathing for a moment. She stared at the picture. Then whispered, "Is that thus?" Aitan's eyes filled with tears. Martin answered softly, Yes, sweetheart. Mary's hands trembled as she began reading the documents. One page read, "3 sisters removed from the custody of close relatives." Another stated, "Placed under temporary protective care." Her throat tightened. For the first time, she was seeing her past not as a story, but as an official record. It was real. Written in black ink across those pages. Barely above a whisper, she said, "So, we really were abandoned." Aitan immediately sat beside her and gently took her hand. "No." Her voice trembled. "You are not abandoned children." Mary struggled to hold back her tears. Aitan continued, "You were children who had an incredibly difficult beginning." She gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "But afterward, you were raised with love." Martin knelt beside them. "Your past was never your fault." At that moment, Mayhin and Maren entered the living room. They immediately sensed the silence. The 2 sisters exchanged worried glances. Maren quietly asked, "What happened?" Mary silently handed them the folder. As they looked through the papers, they too fell silent. For several long moments, no one spoke. It felt as though the 3 sisters were standing before a door that had always existed. A door leading into the darkest part of their past. Finally, Mayhin asked in a trembling voice, "They really didn't want us?" The question shattered Aitan's heart. She immediately pulled all 3 girls close. Sometimes, a tear slipped down her cheek. Some people simply don't know how to be parents. She gently stroked their hair. But that never means you were unworthy of love. Martin took a slow breath before speaking. His voice was calm, steady, and reassuring. "My girls, you're growing up. And because of that, we're ready to tell you everything." The sisters listened carefully. "But there is one thing you must never forget." Martin looked into each of their eyes. "Your past is your strength. It is not your destiny." A quiet night. That night, the villa felt quieter than it had in years. No one spoke loudly. Even at dinner, thoughtful silence surrounded the table. Later, Aitan quietly entered each of her daughters' bedrooms, gently pulling their blankets over them. Even in her sleep, Mayhin was still holding one of her sister's hands. Maren had fallen asleep with dried tears on her cheeks. But Mary, she was still awake. She sat by the window, gazing silently into the night sky. Aitan quietly walked over. "You're still awake?" Without taking her eyes off the stars, Mary whispered, "Mom." "Yes, my beautiful girl." She took a slow, trembling breath. Then, for the very first time, she spoke the question that had been growing inside her for years. "One day, I want to meet my biological mother." For a brief moment, it felt as though Aitan's heart had stopped beating. Yet the only thing visible on her face was quiet, unconditional love. Because she understood. Some journeys have to begin before a person can truly understand where they came from. And perhaps, their greatest test was only just beginning. End of chapter. Some truths can break your heart. But sometimes, healing begins only after you find the courage to look directly at the wound. And that night, the 3 sisters didn't simply discover an old file. They opened the first door to their own past. Spring had settled gently over Istanbul. Warm sunlight poured through the villa's wide windows, and the sweet scent of jasmine drifted in from the garden. Yet despite the beautiful morning, the house felt unusually quiet. Ever since the old file had been discovered, something had changed. Mary had become more thoughtful. Mayhin and Marin were quieter than usual. And Eitan and Martin knew exactly why. The past had finally knocked on their door. Questions without answers. Breakfast was unusually silent. The clinking of forks and spoons echoed through the dining room until Marin finally broke the silence. "Mom." Eitan looked up with a gentle smile. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think our real mother ever thought about us?" No one answered immediately. Eitan took a slow breath before speaking. "I don't know, my love." Martin reached for the girl's hands. "But we're going to find out." Mary slowly lifted her eyes. For the first time in days, there was a small spark of hope. An old friend. That afternoon, Eitan picked up her phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Mrs. Seville. The social worker who had guided them through the adoption process all those years ago. The familiar voice answered warmly. "Eitan, it's so wonderful to hear from you." Eitan smiled faintly. "The girls have grown up." There was a brief pause. "And now they're asking about their past." Mrs. Seville sighed softly. "I always knew this day would come." Eitan looked toward the living room, where the girls were quietly reading together. "We want to help them. We just don't know where to begin." Mrs. Seville answered without hesitation. "Leave it to me. I'll start searching tomorrow." The dusty archives. The next morning, Mrs. Seville walked through the old government archives. Long rows of shelves stretched before her, filled with forgotten files, faded documents, and records that hadn't been opened for years. Hours passed. She carefully searched through adoption records, child protection reports, and old residence documents. Nothing. Then, an elderly archivist carried over a worn blue folder. "You might want to look at this one." Mrs. Seville carefully opened it. Yellowed pages rustled beneath her fingers. Suddenly, her eyes stopped on one document. At the bottom of the page were the words, "Denai's last registered address." Mrs. Seville froze. After all these years, the first real clue had finally appeared. A ray of hope. That evening, Mrs. Seville arrived at the villa carrying a large envelope. Everyone gathered around the dining table. No one spoke. Mary couldn't take her eyes off the envelope. Eitan quietly asked, "Did you find anything?" Mrs. Seville nodded. "Yes." The room fell completely silent. "I found the last known address where Denai's lived." Marin jumped to her feet. "Does that mean we'll find her?" Mrs. Seville smiled gently. "I can't promise that." She looked directly at Mary. "But now, we finally have somewhere to begin." Mary felt tears filling her eyes. For years, her past had been hidden behind unanswered questions. Now, for the first time, there was a path leading toward the truth. Hope and fear. That night, Mary stood by her bedroom window. The lights of Istanbul shimmered across the Bosphorus. She held the envelope tightly against her chest. She was afraid. Afraid of what she might discover. Afraid of what she might lose. But alongside that fear, a new feeling had appeared. Hope. Maybe the answers she had searched for all her life were finally within reach. Maybe the past wasn't as far away as she had always believed. Sometimes, changing a life doesn't begin with a miracle. Sometimes, it begins with a single address written on an old piece of paper. And sometimes, The first clue becomes the first step toward finding the truth. If you're curious about the continuation of this story, you can support me by subscribing to my channel. Liking the video and sharing your thoughts in the comments greatly helps my stories reach more people.